Hello and very welcome to this last session for this year for the Nordic Life Science Days. And the topic for this last session is the Nordic capital landscape. And I would like to say that I think they will have a focus on the early stages in this capital landscape. And we're trying to find out where are we good and where can we be better in this Nordic region. But first, some words about me. My name is Pontus Ottsson, and I will try to lead this session, the coming 1 hour and 50 minutes. And I'm right now head of investment on Chalmers Ventures. And 30 seconds about Chalmers Ventures, you know what I'm coming from. It's a fairly new company, and it's fully owned by Chalmers University, and it's a combination of the incubation, the tech transfer unit, and the investment part of Chalmers. And together we have 15 years experience from different organizations that were merged in 2015, 2 years ago. Before that, we have evaluated 3,800 ideas. I would say that it's over 4,000 different ideas now. Started about 400 projects, and we have a very, very high success rate in the companies that we start. The current portfolio is broad, and we are not just focusing on life science, that is the topic on these days, but we have a couple of life science projects and pharma projects actually as well. And some of them in our focus portfolio, that is 25 companies. The total value of those 25 companies is around 1.5 billion Swedish crowns, to put some numbers on it. We have an investment capacity of 30 million Swedish kronor a year over a 10 years period. So it's a fairly small fund, but we can be the bridge from very early stages into later stages. And we would like to go in first. We'll be the first investor. So, enough about Chalmers Ventures, and I would like to introduce my friends over here that will entertain you the coming 1 hour. And we will take you in order, and I would like to welcome NLSDays up here from Svenska Patent- och Registreringsverket. And I hope that you will say something more enthusiastic than the Svenska Patent- och Registreringsverket. Tell us some minutes about what you're doing.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to show you a short clip. It is in Swedish, so bear with me. I'll translate it afterwards. It's short, so focus. No. It's really, really short.
Yeah.
The direct translation is your company can have hidden assets. Find them at prv.se. This is an ad that's been running this spring and summer in Sweden. And I hope that at least a few of you have seen it before. It's targeting SMEs and aim to get innovators and business people to go into our website and do a self-test to find the values in your own company. And to get the thought started. And why does a national patent authority do this kind of ad? To explain that, I'll read you our mandate. And as authority, it's not just our goals, it's really what the government tells and expects us to do. PRV has two main tasks: to ensure well-functioning systems for registration of intellectual property rights and to inform and give service in intellectual property matters. Our instruction further adds that we shall work to promote growth and strengthen the innovation and competitiveness in the whole country. During recent years, the Swedish government has given us a wider assignment together with our sister authority, Vinnova. And we are to carry out initiatives and information activities to get you all a better knowledge and understanding of intellectual property and intellectual assets to make better business. And the activities are directed to public parties, to Swedish enterprises, and to the public. And please note that it's not just intellectual property, patent, but the whole of intellectual assets. And listening to presentations during these days and talking to a few of you, it's clear, also clear, and since before, that you know your patents, you know your patent tactics. But that is a part of intellectual property in a wider sense. And that could be a company's logotype. We've seen them all over here. We have our down there. It's part of register a trademark, but it's just one part. You have to think of branding aspects and how to use the logotype. We have business concepts. It's quite a classic one, actually, how you earn money. The money is the topic of the day and why you're here. And maybe your business concept is unique and it really core value for your company. We have the company name. It's not the trademark, it's the company name. Maybe that is unique, something that you need to treasure. Customer files. It's not just the up-and-coming GDPR law. It's something that probably you have value in. Not just the big companies with big data, but for smaller companies as well. We have working methods. You collaborate a lot in all technical fields. You collaborate with new business from other fields. And that is something of value in itself. It's not just legal aspects, finding a great way to do it legally, but the method in itself. Then you have design. It's obvious here that many people work a lot with design aspects, getting the customer used to your business via the design. And then we have computer software, quite of a dear topic to me. Going into digitalization, maybe you hire someone to make your software, and who owns that source code? And that's a challenge for many companies. So my point with this is that you need to have worked through business strategy, not an IP strategy in all, not just patent strategy. And of course, the patent office wants you to think of intellectual property. But we know that it's a big investment. It costs lots of money, it takes lots of time, and it is complex, maybe too complex to really grasp. But we know that 80% of the value in a company is from intangible assets, and it's a value that we need to grab and grow. And intellectual property has really gotten on the agenda from the Swedish government during the last years. And they see that if well-functioning systems and your knowledge is important to keep you growing and keep the entrepreneurs in Sweden to grow. And therefore, coming a bit into this topic, we have innovation vouchers. We have them together with Vinnova, who's in charge of the money. They are distributed via advisors, Almi, IUC, and Companion. And the money is used to create a basic business IP strategy, not a sort of hidden first investigation if you file for a patent. Per company, it's 100,000 kroners, and we have given in total 90 million in 3 years. And this is the government's way to show that it is important, and it's sort of getting into this topic of capital. Sweden is not an investor. We don't have that money. But the thing is that we know and hear from a lot of companies and investors that a well-managed IP portfolio is important to attract capital in the long run, and the big capital, not just the smallest first investor. And I think that was it for me. I look forward to discussion, listening more than talking.
Thank you, Anna. Hidden values and intangible assets. We'll come back to that. For me, it's very much the foundation for life science company. So we take one step further, and Yilmaz will have some words about Industrifonden.
Yes, so I'm Yilmaz Mashid. I work as an investment manager at Industrifonden and represent them here in this panel. We are a fund with a balance sheet of around 500 million euros. We have 2 divisions. We have a life science team, which I represent, and then we also have a tech team. In our fund, we have around 13 active companies which we work with in the life science team, and then we have 2 other companies which are more passive companies in our portfolio. And we are a very active investor. We take board seats. We are board observers and help to build and create and develop the companies that we invest in. And we are a typical equity investor in those companies, and we do focus on private companies when we invest.
Okay, and how big checks do you typically write? In what span do you invest?
I would say around Series A, kind of, not seed investments, but when we have an idea that has been conceptualized and want to take the next step. If we take pharma biotech companies, which I mostly involved with, tend to be when they want to start phase 1 studies, or just after phase 1 studies, or during phase 1 clinical studies.
So it's typically A and B rounds, and then because
I would say so. We have in a single portfolio companies, I think we have invested up to around 170 million Swedish kronor. That's the highest we've gone so far. I think we have, it all depends on our balance sheet, having around 500 million euros. I think we have some kind of cap around 200. And the first tickets may be in the size of vicinity of maybe 20 million or 2 million euros to start with, and then you can tranche it upwards up to around 20 million euros.
Perfect. Thanks. And then, Stefan Krischau for Novo.
Yes, so I'm partner with Novo Seeds, which is a part of Novo Holdings. And Novo Holdings is the holding company of the Novo Nordisk Foundation. So the first thing I'll say is we're not a strategic investor for Novo Nordisk, although we own a controlling part of Novo Nordisk. Novo Holding administers all the assets of the foundation. And we have 3 teams investing directly in life science, and the funds we invest from is about 11 billion euros. Obviously, in the Seeds team, we administer the smallest part of that. We have an annual investment budget of about 25 million euros. In Novo Seeds, as you can hear from the name, we don't shy away from doing seed investments, in particular here in the Nordic region. But our sweet spot is really sort of Series A rounds, where we invest together with our friends in the other venture funds to take the companies to the first inflection points. Novo Seeds has existed for 10 years. Just as Yilmaz said, we are very active investors. We take a board seat, we work with the companies, we roll up our sleeves and try to help with getting the right experts and board members and advisors and management team members associated with the company. to help the company and the project realize the value. We are pretty agnostic with regard to indication areas, molecules. We do small molecules, peptide, proteins, gene therapy. Most of our companies are in the therapeutic space, but we also have a few medtech and diagnostic, and even one industrial biotech company. Right now, we have a little bit more than 20 active portfolio companies in the portfolio. We are a team of 7 individuals working with the companies. And maybe the last thing I'll mention is that we also administer a grant program called Pre-Seed, which is true grants. There are no strings attached. That's to academic researchers that have ideas that are not quite ready for a seed investment, but the Pre-Seed grant is then to help these projects develop to a seed financeable stage. And then finally, the last word is, so once we invest, even though we're called NovoSeeds, we do follow our companies all the way to exit. So we can, although we can come in with small rounds, 1 million euro tickets, we can actually follow the companies all the way, hopefully, to an exit. At least that's our intention.
So to understand it here, you're a little bit earlier than Industrifonden then?
Yes,
Yep.
we're a little bit earlier,
Yep.
but otherwise, I think fairly aligned.
Yeah.
We have co-investments
Yeah.
with several co-investments with Novo.
Great, thank you. And then Carsten Boring from Nasdaq. Welcome.
Thanks, and nice to be among these clever guys up here. We hope to see a lot of your companies. As you all know, that Nasdaq is all about listing of companies. I've been in the listings industry since more than 16 years. Before that, I was in corporate finance, so I know how it is to IPO a company. I did the IPO of Lundbeck in Copenhagen back in the old days, and 16 years seems like a long time for being in one company, but when you are devoted to what you're doing and you have a strong passion to help companies to grow and create wealth and everything for the countries, it's not a long journey. We came out as Copenhagen Stock Exchange. It's the oldest exchange in the world, in fact. And in 2005, most of you know that we call it merged, but we were acquired by the stock exchange here in Stockholm. And in 2008, we became Nasdaq. Today, we run 8 exchanges globally. We have, of course, the exchange in New York, as you all know, with the Nasdaq Biotech Index, the biggest biotech hub in the world. And here in the Nordic region, we run the exchange on Iceland, in Denmark, Sweden, Finland, and the Baltic countries. And it may come as a surprise for some of you that, in fact, we are the biggest biotech hub in Europe, in the Nordic region, by far. And it's, of course, divided into different models in different countries. Denmark is very big on the very big biotech companies. I think Denmark stands for 2/3 of all the market cap within biotech in the Nordic region. But Sweden is definitely ahead when it comes to number of companies, and especially what we are going to talk about today, companies in the early stage. And when we talk about early stage, we have created 2 platforms. We have the main market where we have Novo Nordisk, thank you, creating a lot of wealth and put it back into the ecosystem is very, very good and helpful for our industries within biotech. And then we have First North. I created First North more than 10 years ago, and it was a decision or vision I had when I was a corporate finance guy, talking to all these wonderful small companies, where I am as an individual person could not invest in these very exciting companies. It was only for, at that time, pension funds or some very rich people, and the idea there to create a junior market where smaller companies could bear the burden of being a public company. There's lighter rules on First North, and hopefully create an even stronger ecosystem for smaller companies. And I think we have achieved some of that. Today we have almost 300 companies on First North across the Nordic region, and we have 60 companies within healthcare on First North. We have 60 companies within healthcare on our main market, and we have 700 companies on the main market. So you can say, in a way, that Early stage is good for First North, and we have created a platform for guys like you out there. Early stage companies that need capital to grow and even grow even further. So, few words about NASDAQ. I hope most of you are familiar with us. Otherwise, I need to step up and talk a little bit more. But let's move on.
Thank you. And Farzad, we take the step over to Norway. Yeah, welcome.
Is this working? Yeah. So I'm Farzad Abdeswali. I'm a partner at Starship Seed. We actually celebrate our 10th anniversary, like Stefan, this year. We were set up back in 2007. People say that the seed universe or seed actors are rare animals. We're extinct, basically, in threat of extinction in terms of coming from Norway, basically. We are extremely rare, basically. When we were put together back in 2007, this was like a shot in the dark, as it were, to see if we could do something with the life science scenario in Norway. And so basically our fund, when it was first established, it was established as a mixed fund. The investors were basically major energy, Statoil, and so on, to start with, to leverage their investments. And what we found actually over the past 10 years is that we've become a major focal point for deal flow with respect to life sciences in Norway. So we've actually just this spring established our second fund, again with a major focus on life sciences, based on the experience of the last 10 years. And with respect to the market, the listing, we've actually, in terms of our performance, something that we're quite pleased with is that we just actually listed one of our companies last spring, Bergen Bio, which I suppose many are familiar with here. So in terms of having to prove ourselves over the past 10 years, we feel that this is a viable thing to carry on with. And so hopefully the next 10 years will prove us right. Our fund is basically, when it was first established in the first round, it was something in the region of 40 million euros. In this current fund number 2, we have just recently, again last spring, closed our first round, first closing at 300 million Norwegian, and we're hoping to go up in a second closing up to approximately 500. Again, with the hope that we can actually build on the last 10 years that we've done, basically. So that's me.
Yep. Thank you very much. And then, out in the corner, a brand new player on the market.
The
Here
one-armed man.
Yeah.
Yes.
From SumInvest.
Exactly.
And you will show some slides
Absolutely.
and explain what SumInvest is. Welcome.
If you wonder what happened to my arm, I can tell you we had a fight yesterday over who should be the first speaker, and as you can see, I lost. I'm the lost speaker. Anyway, so SumInvest is a new company. It's the Swedish government's initiative to vitalize the Swedish VC market. Am I supposed to have something?
I have it actually here. You can borrow this one.
Yeah. We started in February in practice, and what SumInvest is that it's a fund actor. The Swedish government is leaving the sort of direct investment strategy, which they had with Fourier Transform and Inlandsinnovation. They will exist for a few years, but they are going to be dismantled. And the funds are going to be moved to SumInvest's fund-of-fund operations. And the scope of SumInvest is very broad, and I think that's one of the good things with SumInvest. There are very few sort of obligations. We can be from seed or even pre-seed, invest in funds that are involved in seed or even pre-seed, up to later stage growth, but not buyouts. That's not where we're supposed to be. When it comes to sector, it's the same. It's a very broad scope. We can be basically in any sector, including, of course, life sciences. And where we are in both these dimensions is depending on the opportunities and obviously where we are needed, because we are supposed to be there and help out a little bit. I'll come back to that later. So apart from this sort of overall scope that we have to develop the Swedish VC market and its ecosystem, our focus is to look for funds or teams with a certain number of characteristics. And we are looking for experienced investors. We are looking for preferably emerging teams. And you could say, is there a contradiction between these two? First, when I heard about it the first time, I said that's an interesting one. But actually, you can see it can be spin-offs from other teams. It can be angels that want to sort of gear up, etc. So it is compatible. But it can be existing teams too. But preferably, it's emerging teams, new teams to the ecosystem. And what is very important for us is the alignment of interests, GP commitment, skin in the game. Another thing is participation of private capital. We can never go up more than 49 or slightly less than 50% in a fund. We don't want to do that. We're not allowed to do it. Should have a Swedish structure. It can be a parallel structure, but as it is now, it should exist in a Swedish structure. And then obviously the focus of the funds we invest in should be in the innovative and fast-growing segments. Now we take care of all that with our investment process or method, and there is nothing unique about it. It's just what it is, a process. So we do the same things and we ask the same questions and so on. And I'll show you later why that is. There is a point in itself to do that when it comes to feedback to future teams. We opened our doors in February. And we've had about between 60 and 70 teams that has sort of contacted us in one form or another. And the feedback that we get is, you can say that there is a lack of capital if we start from the bottom and we move up. There is a lack of capital among the companies. That's self-evident. I'm not going to comment on that. That's it's the step number one. But when it comes to the VC teams or the VC funds, what we can see from the deal flow we've had so far, we can see that the most common challenge that a team has is that it has little or no investment experience, a lot of knowledge around, the sector or the segment that they are in, usually very high, but what's mostly or most often lacking is the investment experience. And of course also is another feature that sort of pops out is that usually the funds are undersized in terms of being able to carry the costs that it costs to implement the strategy, the intended strategy of the team. So, and also the lack of capital, and that's maybe also self-evident, but I would say that it's, when I started off, people I talked to described it to, that there is capital, but in certain segments there is a problem. My view after these 6-7 months is that there is quite a broad problem. It's easier to talk about the pockets where you have a good supply of capital rather than the other way round. And this is especially true for life sciences, where not only emerging teams have problems to get money, but also established teams also have problems to get money. So that's the sort of VC team, VC fund aspect, and then you have the private investors. Very often we forget that there is a role here for some investors to play, is to market and make it easier for funds to get access to private investors. The problem for the VC segment as an asset class is that it has low returns, not on a fund basis, but if you aggregate it, it's not that exciting. Small tickets, we have big pension institutions in the Nordic countries, and usually the tickets are so small that they don't really make a big difference on the bottom line. You have the high costs. So I mean, for example, if you take the pension companies, which have a lot of money in our Nordic system, they are very much measured on how high cost they have. So they are very uneasy about hiring people and so on. And this is typically a segment that is sort of labor intensive in that sense. And then you have the brand issues. I mean, it doesn't matter with if you have a small holding or a big holding. If it turns out that a VC fund investment you've made is laundering money or something like that, it can be a catastrophe for the brand name of the investor, which means that all in all, it's easier not to invest in VC funds than to do it. And that is an issue that we have to work with. Now, I'm not going to go through our model because of the time issue, but I mean, capital is one thing. We have this process in order to know if we should invest or not when we look at a team. But there are two other functions that our process has as well, and that is to prepare the team to go out and raise money with private investors. If they have done it with us a number of times, they should be more prepared and better prepared to meet the private investors outside. That's also one of the points with our investment process. And the last thing is that if we decide for some reason along the road not to invest, this is the basis of a feedback to the team to be able to come back in 2 or 3 or 5 months to us with a sort of new proposal, and we can take it from there. And then also so what we're doing on the private investor side, as I told you before, I mean, we have a role to play. That's my conviction, and I would say that it's in order to be able to help. It's a question of trust. Some investors must have high degree of trust among investors and among institutions, and they should know that when we look at a team, we do it thoroughly, professionally. Obviously, when it comes to the size issue, we push for higher fund sizes, not only because we contribute with money, but also by other sort of feedback to try for the funds to reach the critical mass that they need. DD costs, what we want to do is that if we have made a thorough D&D and looked at the fund parameters, it should be easy for private investors to just go along with it, that they trust us, that we have made something that is fair and transparent and reasonable. That also will help private money to come into this. And the last thing, obviously, is the brand issue I talked about. We will pay particular attention to see that the teams and the people that are involved are, good people in general, so that the institutions can feel that if we have looked into it, then they shouldn't be too nervous about investing in a VC fund. So, last picture here. So what are we doing right now? Well, we are doing basically we have three processes. One of them is handling today's deal flow. We have come quite far with about 3 funds today, of which one is within life science. The other thing we're doing is to stimulate the future supply of VC funds, i.e. tomorrow's deal flow. I mean, we do that by giving constructive feedback to teams that maybe are not really ready yet. We are marketing some invest, like I'm doing right now here. And we're also cooperating with a number of players to find, flexible solutions for business angels or organizations and so on, because this is clearly a sector where one size doesn't fit all. So we're trying to do that as well. And the third thing is, of course, that we work with the big private players in the Nordics, and we try to have a dialogue with them to understand how we can help them to dare to take this step and engage themselves more in the VC segment, and obviously marketing some invest among those players as well. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. Well, with this as an introduction and background, so you understand what view we have, the different persons here, we can start the discussion. And maybe what I forgot to mention is that I'm right now working at Chalmers Ventures, and I began my work there this spring. But before that, I've been 13 years in Pulse. That's a private investor for early pre-seed and seed investments within the life science area based in Helsingborg. So I believe it's because of that they asked me to be here today. The topic for today is the capital landscape, and we have some different views from the very, very early stages, the innovation checks that you talked about, to the seed, pre-seed and seed investors, and also the Series A and the public market actors here. But let us slice the market in another way. Let us take a short view country by country and start with maybe Denmark. Which are the main actors within the pre-seed and seed phase in the life science area?
Unfortunately, we don't need to spend a lot of time discussing that.
Nope.
There are not that many. Obviously, we are the biggest party in the life science space. With our pre-seed program, we even reach into academia, and then we cover all stages of investments. But then, of course, the Lundbeck Foundation have a similar structure. They have Lundbeck Fund Emerge for the early investments and Lundbeck Fund Ventures. And then there is really only one real venture fund left that do life science investment, that's Sunstone. Before we used to have seed capital, they still exist, and I believe they still invest a little in medtech, but that's about it. So being an entrepreneur or a company in Denmark, and if you want to seek out the Danish investors, you don't need to do a lot of homework to find out some addresses, unfortunately.
Okay, let's go to Norway. Maybe that's even quicker done.
It's probably even shorter. Obviously, we are an actor there. There are other players looking at the very small amounts of funding. The Cancer Society, for example, in Norway it's not actually seed funding, but so very small funders, as it were, are very few and far between. And I think really, and this is actually one of the things that I was hoping to touch upon with respect to the Norwegian landscape, is that Norway is actually, the challenge really with respect to Norway is that because we are the new kids on the block trying to do something, from scratch, as it were, the challenge really is having the historic know-how in terms of getting something done, and to have the comfort to put the money on the table, as it were. So there are players who actually, once you, I mentioned the Cancer Society who do support with small amounts of fund, but actually what they bring to the table is credibility with respect to the case. So we do have some actors. You have TTOs who do give some small amounts of funding, but apart from ourselves, I don't think there is really that much really in terms of seed funding. So.
Yeah. Okay, and some words about Sweden.
Sweden, I think if we go back like 10, 15 years ago, after the millennium, I think we had many VCs here in Sweden. I think up to like 10 VCs. But I think it comes back to what Peter said. There was capital, maybe those people weren't experienced in the investment and understood fully the life science segment, that it takes time. So almost all of them are gone today. So basically the co-investors that we invest with in Sweden, or the co-investor is HealthCap, which has survived, which have managed to make returns just as our fund, and survived and can raise new funds. So I think it's in Stockholm. If you come to Sweden, Stockholm, there are two addresses for the larger funds, let's say Industry Fund and HealthCap.
Yeah, and maybe if we go a little bit earlier stages, we maybe should mention Almi as a big investor, broad investor in the earlier stages, and maybe my earlier company as well, Puls, that is a very small play but niched in this segment. But it is there's room for more players. It seems like in the whole region.
I mean, that's where we hope that the Sum Invest maybe if we find the right teams who also can attract some more private capital, maybe from even abroad, to come to Sweden with the new hub that's being built here by Karsten here in Sweden, where we have also listed companies on then we could probably have at least one more good-sized fund. That would be excellent.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's definitely room for more venture funds, and I think it's a great initiative that the Swedish government has got behind and put real money to work. But I would also point out that now you sort of take the different countries, country by country, and we are small countries, but it is really an international industry. So in effect, we should regard ourselves as a part of Europe. And although in Europe there is not a ton of venture funds, at least there are more than the one or two handfuls we can count if we add all the Scandinavian countries together. There may be 30 or 40 venture funds in Europe, and so the situation is not as isolated and barren, although admittedly, yes, I think in most countries you'll find ample room for more venture funds.
And some words about the public market. Does that differ? You have the span actually over
So you
some
can
countries.
see some trends in the Nordic region, and especially with the small companies like we're talking about today, and the entrepreneur companies. It is Sweden is outstanding. It is if we take First North, our First North market, we have about 300 companies on it. 250 of these are from Sweden or based in Sweden or an AB structure. And it has been growing very fast, and it has only evolved the last 5 years with a rapid speed here in Sweden, and due to some very great initiative by the government to support this ecosystem as well, to bring more capital within the early stage companies, and that's bringing also a spillover effect into our market. But First North in the Nordic region is, and especially Sweden, is something amazing. If we look at on the European landscape, we have been when I created First North in 2005, we were looking at AIM in London as the father of all small exchanges and junior market, as we call them, exchange-regulated markets. And today we have the last 10 quarters, we have beaten AIM by number of companies due to the rapid speed here in Sweden. And it's not about stealing companies from VCs or private equity, or it's to bring more capital into the market. So we have something special going in the Nordic region across borders. We are small countries and we are very close. I think there's, the bridge is, I don't know how long it is, 5 kilometers or something, and then you're in Denmark. So we have something special going. And when you say that Denmark is a little bit behind, a lot behind, we can see that Danes have always been very fast mover in changing. So we in fact have listed a few or 2 handfuls of companies here in Sweden. We convert them into an AB structure, and then we put it on the exchange here in Sweden, because there is something cooking here in Sweden. It's outstanding when you look at Europe. And when we meet, I'm very much involved in our EU policy and how we work with the EU and try to attract more money into the ecosystem of small companies, because it's so important for Europe to win this game. And that's why it's so important that you guys are around, because we are way behind the US. 2/3 of all financing for companies in Europe is from banks. And we know for a fact that banks don't like small companies without any revenue or profit or anything. So that's why we need to have more capital into these companies so they can lend more money out. So that is very, very important to work on that journey. And I know that a lot of politicians in Europe are looking at the Swedish model, and I'm talking a lot about the Swedish model in the EU as well.
Do you have, Peter?
Yes,
just
I
one more.
just wanted to say that I very much agree with what you said about countries and stuff. I mean, the Nordics Sweden is too small. I mean, even though we are a Swedish player, we definitely see within life sciences that Sweden usually is too small. It should be a broader scope. So we are part of the Nordics. We're part of Europe, and some Invest does not sort of the thing with the Swedish structure doesn't imply that we expect funds to invest only in Sweden. I just wanted to make that clear, that in order for funds to have survival bias, they should be broad and they should be able to have, a broad market to invest in. So I very much agree with that.
I just wanted to actually pick up on something that Stefan said about the global perspective, as it were, with respect to cases, and I completely agree with that. With respect to our approach in our second fund, actually, we have decided to actually not go, well, as far as we can, not go it alone, to have actually a co-investor in our cases, and that co-investor would be one who can actually take the case further. Now, that's maybe an obvious statement, but the reason why I'm saying this actually is because one of the players in Norway, Investor which has very deep pockets, they have actually said to us, they have been very supportive and accommodating in terms, and also understanding actually, in terms of where we are coming from. Also with respect to accommodating seed investments. They have actually said that if it's possible that, in terms of for them to dig into their pockets and supporting cases, that they would like to have a global, a European actor, for example, who would come on board on cases together with us as a seed player, to give them that comfort to be able to, for them to open their pockets, as it were, and follow on and so on. So I think the globality of the case is extremely important. I think it's a very important thing to remember, because it's basically you have to be, for lack of a better word, you have to be born global, as it were. It's a very, we all know it's a struggle basically to take things forward and then try and get some people. If you can get someone on board already at the outset, it's much easier. So that's basically what we're hoping to do in the second round, as it were.
Yeah, to become the bridge actually out to the world and attract money from outside the region to come in and then take the step out. So, but maybe take a step back then. We'll come back to that a bit later, but let's start from the very beginning. You mentioned the very early stages that you can actually facilitate some money to the for some patent work, so to say.
The point was not just patents, and not just the early stage either. It's important even for not just the beginners, but the bigger companies probably have come quite a bit farther.
Because from my point of view, this is one of the industries that is born global, that you need to think global from the very, very beginning. A lot of other industries can start local and then go further and further, but here we need to start actually with the patent application that can be broad over the globe to actually defend the product in the future. But how do you look on the intangible assets and the hidden values when you evaluate a new product and a company as an investor? That would be interesting to hear. How much effort do you spend on that when you invest in the very early stages, for example, in Facade?
Well, actually, we are risk takers, so obviously it's a cost-benefit thing, really. We would like to have the IP in place and the freedom to operate analysis and so on, everything kind of packaged nicely, but we all know that's not the case. You get all kinds of cases on your table, and so I would say, it all depends on the case, really. In the majority of cases, I would say something like, 95% of the cases, we would like to have the patent, fixed up. But obviously, if you have an outlier with fantastic, technology, and how often that happens, I don't know, but it's it's very rare. But what I'm saying is that we're not we're not absolutely dogmatic about that it has to be 100% there, basically.
Okay. Yeah, but at least you need to have a strategy.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, and something I noted is that you give grants to help early stage projects and companies to develop a patent strategy.
Right.
Because often in very early stage companies, they will maybe have a patent filing. Yeah. That's the first step. which is all good and fine, but maybe more importantly, to have some kind of thinking about if we develop this, how can we broaden the patent protection? How can we, what can we see? I mean, even think ahead, the inventions I have not made yet, but I will make as I make the journey with this product, how can I protect them? So I think getting some money to that and getting some experienced advice to early stage projects is obviously important.
Yeah, I believe that a lot of money can be saved if you do it right from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And I believe that you put pretty much efforts into the DD of the IP situation when you invest Industrifond and Novo and so on. But what about when you go public? When you going to list a company? How do you manage?
The exchange is all about transparency and trust. And we must say, if you have a company and you go very broad out to a lot of investors, and not all investors have the deep knowledge about the company like you guys have, I think it's even more important to have patent in the company. We know some companies don't do it because they say they are fast movers and so on, but that's very special cases. The rule number one, if you are going public, you need to have the patents. And that's only why I can support what have been said. It's very important to have it early on in the company lifetime, because it's really difficult to catch up in the end. And when companies are going public, there's a lot of things that needs to be done very fast. And that's why it's so important for small companies to think about the structure from the beginning, because then they are more open, they have more routes to go for when they need to have capital. They can go to the VCs, and they can also present a better case to the VCs because they have a stronger case to show them and say we have control of our patents, so they can't be precious on price so much. And the same if they're going to be sold to a big pharma company or somebody else.
And Carsten, we can maybe mention one interesting example, Forward Pharma, that went to your mothership in the US. That was a very much case built exclusively around their unique patent position. In the end, they ended up doing a spectacular deal with Biogen that simply had to acquire them or acquire the rights that they had protected. And I can't remember the figures, but it was something like $1.75 billion. And obviously, that is a very good example of the value that good patents can have.
But it's also a good example of being creative when you have a patent. Yeah. Because I think that the counterpart was a little bit, okay, they don't have the money to sue us. They don't have the money to do anything. We can just grab the patent. And then the owners of the company think, oh no, we're going public to raise some money to protect our patent. So they can, and that's why I think the numbers were so high, and now they're paying out the dividend to the owners. And one of the owners is, in fact, our Danish state-owned Vækstfond, who get money back and can invest in very small companies again. So it's nice to see the ecosystem work.
From my point of view, the IP is the foundation of a life science company, and I mentioned that before. But Peder, you work in different industries, and you have a broader view than just the life science. Do you have any words about your view? What is the biggest difference for the life science investments and other industries from your point of view?
The feedback that we get from our deal flow is things that you already know. I mean, it's quite clear that the time horizon is longer. And I would also say that the impression that we get is that basically, now we talk about early stage, but basically in all stages there is a lack of money, because it's also a question of being able to hold to follow the product or and be part of it at much later stages than it is possible to be today. So I mean, I see the problem of the whole range as bigger than I thought from the beginning. And then of course there is the time aspect. I mean, typically this takes X years longer than for maybe an ordinary tech fund, VC fund or so.
So it's a time aspect and, of course, the need of money. And one thing that was clear here when we talked about the landscape is that it's pretty few players actually in this region. And there is a lack of pre-seed and seed investment. Of course, there is the tech transfer offices, and they can write small checks to come a little bit further, take the step outside of the university at least, and rent an office, maybe file a patent, but not sure that they have a patent strategy then. But what do we need to bridge from there to actually come to a stage where that company is of interest for Industrifonden? And so what do we need here? If we have the creator over here that actually can do something about the landscape. So what we would like to see?
I mean, one thing we experience with companies coming quite early, they think, coming back to the global theme here, they think very locally. The small companies maybe run around with the couple of investors that are here in Sweden, while we know in our dialogue with other VCs and other investors around in Europe that they have like fresh money, fresh funds that are out there with a lot of money, and these companies seem to don't dare or does not take the move or do not see that it's worthwhile to take the move to meet the investors in continental Europe, for example, or in the UK, etc. But I think that will be very valuable if you start to meet those investors from beginning. Then you will hear a 360 view of what's lacking, how to build the project, how to stipulate the next steps, etc. So I think even though you're small, is the first seed round or maybe the Series A coming up in 6 months or 9 months or 12 months, you should start meeting those people, because it's about credibility. It's about coming there, discussing, getting feedback, and then go back again 6 months later saying, we've done this, we've done that, we're moving in the right direction, and then the investment in Series A or Series B will go much more smooth. I mean, it will not take 9 months with DDs, QLs, etc. You have already exposed yourself to those investors, and we like to syndicate, both Stefan and us. And we know pretty much all of the VCs around in Europe, at least.
Yeah, and I would say the international outlook goes beyond just for investors, because also very often we see these early stage companies, they reached out to all the local professors in their city or region, and they may be good and fine professors and have, of course, relevant scientific and clinical expertise. But if you see in a small company or an early stage project that it's only local expertise, it's also a sign of lack of the global outlook. And I think, obviously, there are so many good scientists, so many good projects here in the region. They can easily reach out and try to engage, try to reach out to the good American professor or Spanish or Chinese or wherever there is expertise in the particular project. And it looks just much more compelling and convincing if you see a company that have engaged experts and consultants globally to help them, because as you say, this give a 360-degree pressure test of the project when you reach out to investors. It's the same thing when you reach out to the experts. Is this really novel? Are there other people doing the same in Barcelona or Boston? And so having that kind of expertise on board is also going to be very valuable.
Yeah, I mean, as a just short, we met the company just a couple of months ago. They've done this in Europe. They knew exactly how European market worked, exactly what price, and they talked to like many hospitals from Mediterranean up to Norway. But if we're gonna take this product to the US, then it was like a big black box. They didn't have that answer at all, because they hadn't thought about reaching out across the Atlantic Sea. And when we think about our project within life science, we basically think US, like 75% of the value. So that was, I think, a good feedback to that company.
Yeah. So that is what we think that we'd like to see from the entrepreneurs and the companies, to be a little bit more global. But think a bit about what do we need, what kind of investors do we need to actually get those companies? And I'll come back to you. So Fasad first.
Yeah. So actually what I was going to say with respect to this last discussion was there's one word, actually, market relevance. So when you're talking about everything, I mean, all kinds of initiatives, prospects that investors look at, it's going to be a product. on the whole. And now this product won't be a product until maybe 10 years down the line at the earliest. Now, if that's the case, then you have to come out of the academic zone and into the market zone. And that market relevance, if you think about oncology, for example, it's a sweet spot in the market. There are millions of different approaches to try, and immuno-oncology is the current darling. But within the immuno-oncology, you have to think again 10 years down the road in terms of market relevance. If you think about clinical practice, how will that change? Obviously, if you could answer those questions, then you would be home dry, basically. But the point is that from an investor's point of view, market relevance is the key word. And when we get prospects crossing our table, basically we have to see how reality-oriented these people actually are. If it's a professor, if it's someone who's kind of done some kind of market research and come back and said, this is what we think it is, that we're not interested. It has to be something which is substantial, because again, it's not only kind of predicting the market, but the market in the future. So you've got a double level of challenge, as it were. So that's basically, when we're looking at prospects, we have to see to what extent these people are market oriented, basically, rather than innovation oriented.
Yep.
I think it's a very important aspect, this with the internationalization of these companies and look outside the Nordic region. And I think also, but it can be very scary for a small entrepreneur for the first time. And that's why I think people like us, we need to hold their hands and help them to get out in the world to meet other investors and get new ideas. And in fact, and even the last couple of years, we have been more and more active, even in the stock exchange, to take unpublic companies to New York. For instance, we have the North American Life Science conference here in mid-November, where last year we brought, I think, 60 or 70 listed and unlisted companies to meet US investors. And we help by bringing some US listed companies to meet with these companies, because they are always looking for new opportunities to buy and so on. But I think it's very important for us guys to help them so they feel comfort. And when you have a small investment in some of these companies, and I know you're good at it, push them out there, hold their hand and say, it's not that scary, because it will be scary. It is scary for the first time to meet a professor from Boston or something grilling you on your business model, and they are two people in the company, and the other part is back in the basement trying to get everything organized, and you are sitting there trying to explain how big you will be in 10 years.
I would actually say if you're scared, you shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
Because it is scary.
But entrepreneurs are
of
special
course,
people, and they want to move on with the project, even though they only can get money from Malmö.
Yeah. And I think that the message is very clear. Think global from the very beginning. Act global, even from the very first word when you write your patent application or whatever you do. And
yeah, I think it's a comment that you often get. Well, look at our similar company in the US. They are valued at this point, and then you go like, but you just said you want to keep the budget as tight as possible to go for the minimal indication, because you don't want to spend so much money. The other party probably said we will spend so much money to take the whole market. So I think it's you come back to the mentality approach, but it's about, since it's the same diseases all over the world, it's about either you treat the disease or you won't treat the disease.
That's a good point, that you often see companies they're so used to be cash constrained, so their budgets are really, really tight, and they've saved every single crown they can possibly save. But that's not really, as an investor, what you'd like to see. You'd like to see an ambitious budget where you build value in the company, because it should be so that every time you invest 1 crown, you create 10 crowns in value. And of course, I understand perfectly the dilemma of the entrepreneur, because they are in a very cash-constrained environment, and that's, I think, Pontus, why you were asking us what could the environment do to foster this. But it is a little bit a chicken and egg question, because as investors, we are also more we want to see this ambitious plan that are really well thought through and have the global scale. I think that will make it easier for us and international investors to recognize them. But of course, we also have to be there for these entrepreneurs with these ambitions, right? And I guess that has been lacking for some years, the availability of funds for those type of ambitious companies here in the region.
And because I think that would be much more easy for us, because if it's the right project with the right ambitious plan, and we can also in the syndication point of view open the new doors also to the European investors to try to fund this much larger cost base to create a much larger value, so to say.
But I think that what you're talking about with this bootstrapping companies, actually, I think that they are fostered in a system where it is or have been lack of capital, actually. So they haven't even been able to think about what can we do if we have financing, because they know there is no money and I need to be like this big so I can go to Industrifonden or Novo or Lundbeck or someone, because there has been a big gap between the early pre-seed investors and the Series A rounds. And some companies are forced, actually you need to survive because you have your baby, you will never kill your baby, especially not when you have fostered it for a couple of years. So they're forced out somewhere. A couple of companies have gone to private angels, business angels. Maybe they have a cap table that makes them impossible to invest in from your point of view as a fund, as investor. Maybe they fit very well into an IPO or at First North or Aktietorget and they take that way out. But how should we fill this gap if we go back to ask Peder for what kind of venture fund should you invest in? And one thing that I can see here is we have two evergreen fund structures here that actually have survived these 15 years that you mentioned. All others are dead except Health Cap maybe. But is that a success factor? We'll come back to that, but first Peder.
Yeah, exactly. I think, it comes down to what SumInvest could do or could contribute in order to improve the landscape, right? I see three ways where maybe, hopefully, we can do something. And first of all, is to get a few teams more, to get them started. That would be a big thing. The second thing which we are working with right now is to find a smart way of gearing up the business angels in order for them to have more muscles and more staying power, being able to follow the investments. That's the second thing. And the third thing I think about is that if we do a good job, which is a prerequisite, and we have trust, the fact that we invest with certain angels or in certain funds, hopefully that will make it much easier to have international investors coming along. I've had a number of meetings with Chinese investors which are extremely interested in having this sort of quality stamp from a Swedish. Sweden is far away, it's a small country, and I think we could make a difference by sort of making a good job there and putting that sort of quality stamp for some investors. So these are the three things I'm sort of seeing that we could contribute, being of course very humble because it's a challenge. I know that.
I believe that business angel can make a big difference in a lot of different industries, especially in tech and so to say industry where you don't need so much investment and the shorter life cycle times. But what's your view on business angels? Can they help?
I think, and obviously in Sweden actually there are much more business angels that there is in Denmark, interestingly enough. I think life science is a difficult industry for business angel because the capital requirements are so large to bring it to an inflection point. So whereas if you're in tech, as you mentioned, you can get much further with a smaller investment. And also, I think permeating what we're discussing here is also, we're talking about internationalization, but it's really, life science is a complex industry and there is this need to think globally and have this network. So it's very difficult for business angels, unless they have a very solid background in the industry, to bring that. And to succeed, it is actually a lot more than money that it takes. so I think there's only actually there's probably some cases where business angels have skill sets that are very relevant for the companies, and they bring network and they work in the company, so where it really can be of help. And of course, with a viable public market, could bring it to that stage where they need to raise the big money. But in many cases, as you say, the cap table can be prohibitive for a venture investor when looking at a company if it has started on some business angel rounds.
Yeah, I think we have both met, me and Christian, Stefan, companies that have business angels coming from other sectors that they think if they have invested in a life science company, in a year or two they have made 10 times the money when other investors are coming in. The life science industry, we know it's an exponential curve. The beginning goes slowly, and then when you have the clinical data, it just the valuations explode. And experience from our own portfolio, maybe you can share some numbers there to create. I mean, we listed two main lists. We did 2 main list IPOs with our portfolio companies this year. To get a billion kroner valuation and to enter the mid-cap segment of the main list, we see that we have invested around 300 to 500 million kroner in those companies to get solid clinical data. And that's for business angels. If they're really successful, they may have maybe 1 billion kroner. And if you have to invest up to 500 million kroner to create the mid-cap main list company,
There is a small gap.
there is some gaps.
Farzad, and then we
Yeah.
need to sum this up.
I just actually wanted to say that with respect to angels, how to create comfort in them is actually what we've experienced is one way of keeping them on board, as it were, is value inflection points. So in the plan where you can actually show them specific, and actually this is in a way, I would say, if you can show that for a given amount of money, the point that you reach is even, I mean, if you look at the number of deals, if you look at deal breakdown, preclinical versus clinical, actually almost half of them are actually, maybe even more, are happening in the preclinical stage, in that setting. So now, obviously, in terms of value, the inflection point, if you can show to the angel that if you can, for that amount of money, reach that point, that this case is, in the best case scenario, it's even exitable, let's say, then obviously, you can retain those people. And I think it's, again, to do the maximum with a minimum amount of money, to be able to show value inflection points. That's basically our experience, is that we've been able to retain people on board, as it were, in terms of following the path, as it were, with specific inflection points, saying that, within this time we will have this result. If everything goes to hell, as it were, after that point, you can still do something with this. So in a way, it's and I think it all comes back to to performance, basically. What you do with basically no money, as it were. How the old saying, if someone gives you lemons, make lemonade. This is a similar kind of thing, that what can you do with absolutely nothing? And people actually, some people are amazing at what they can do with nothing, basically. So but again, for us as investors, when it's all about finding talent, it's all about finding something which is rare, and trying to pluck those out, as it were. And that's the business we're in, and in terms of doing very much with very little, this is that's the challenge.
It can also be
Actually, we need to wrap this up now. I
have one
totally agree,
comment.
because we have just started, and I have a lot of more questions and topics.
One common where the business angels have really helped was the listing of companies. On the First North, for example, with the system in Sweden, where you have the process was already people committing before you go public that you will IPO. That's basically family offices and business angels that have done that, and they will do it because they see that they will get a liquid asset and not a 10-year.
Yep, and I think that the business angels have a great role to fill here, but I think that we need to be honest to them as well, especially the new ones that we let in, that this is a little bit special to invest in life science area. It isn't tech, it isn't ICT. We'll take 5 words each, because I think that you finish now to say people that makes a lot out of nothing. That must be the hidden values that you talked about before. So what is your key message with 5 words? Start with you, Anna.
Oh, right on.
And then I will sum up after that. I will have the last.
Given this topic, it's a bit far out for me, but yeah, see what you have and believe in that.
See when you have. I show it. Yeah.
I think start meeting international VCs earlier to get the feedback, to see if this is a viable way forward for your project. Maybe the project you've seen, people are not seeing value, maybe due to commercial or something other. So I think get the 360 view on your project.
Yeah. Think global, even when you talk about financing, not
Yes.
just only the product.
I think you have to.
You said 5 words?
Yeah, maximum.
In Danish.
So, yeah, well, I don't, yeah. So be ambitious, think global, and persevere. I mean, stay at it. I mean, as an entrepreneur, you need this staying power. It's tough, but if you give up too early, then you will never make it.
Yep. That was 3 words, so I had 2 more. Karsten.
You can get listed even earlier than you think. And we can prove it by 60% of the companies on First North have no profit.
I think actually I can just use one word, and it's being relevant.
Mm.
If you're relevant, that you can take everything from health economics to, you know, the whole picture, as it were. If you're relevant and you keep that in mind in everything you do, then I think it's
Business angels that want to gear up, or experienced individuals that are thinking about building a new team, get in touch with SumInvest.
Thanks. Thank you very much, all of you. We have been talking about the early stages. We are talking about the later stages. We are talking about the gap. We are talking about what we would like to see from the companies. I would like that we follow this discussion with the gaps and how to fill them from a financial view. What new actors do we actually need? And all of you who knows that, send that to Peter, because I think you're the man who can actually rebuild the landscape a little bit at least, and where you should put your money, so don't go into the ICT sector
I feel
too
the
much.
pressure. I feel the pressure.
And with this, I would like to thank all, and let Björn